All right, so a lot of people are misinterpreting this whole tariff thing that's happening right now. So if you haven't heard, $160 billion now has to be refunded back to the businesses and the people that originally paid for it, because back in February, the Supreme Court ruled against Trump. And so since then, he's mentioned a lot of things. But recently, he just posted something very interesting on Truth Social. And I want to remind you guys the big plan, what's going on behind the scenes, and also give you guys some of my opinions on why it is that this whole thing seems to be not going the way that people think it's supposed to go. But really, we are watching a movie and we are watching bigger things happening. So there has to be some optics. There has to be some other things happening behind the scenes, and has to look a certain way in order to achieve a bigger result. So let's get into it and talk about what is happening right now. All right, so I want to first review what's going viral right now, because Reuters reported that on April 20th, the CBP has to return $160-some billion in quote-unquote illegally collected import tariffs to businesses, and that this whole system is going to be set up by the federal government through a system called CAPE, and that there's an eligibility process and you have to do all these different things, and people are reporting on it. And of course, this is not new news. This is from back in February. The president also commented on it through the State of the Union address and many other places, but now we are just seeing it go live. And remember, this only has to do with IEEPA, which is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, which was determined by the court as being misapplied by this administration. But there are countless other ways that Trump can take in tariff revenue. And one of them is Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, or Section 122, where you can announce a 10% global trade for up to 150 days. And then the other one that I mentioned, the 301, this was mentioned by many legal experts and some of the Trump team as being one that they're going to use, or Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930. And again, I'm not going to go through all the details, but there's different ways that he can get this revenue legally in some sense, with the powers that he has right now. But it's not like the whole thing just stopped, right? So just part of it, and it's 162 or 160 some billion dollars. Sounds like a lot, but again, there's many other ways that this can happen. And this, again, back on February 20th, a 6-3 ruling. This is Learning Resources versus Trump, and this basically had a broad implication, and people were going against Trump at the time, saying this is crazy, saying all kinds of stuff, everything from very extremist down to just, this is part of the game. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about today. And one of the specific ways that he's going to use future tariffs is the 60% China tariff. And this was talked about. It could generate $650 billion over a decade. The 100% automobile tariff, which was going to raise $600 billion also over a decade. The universal baseline tariff, a 10% universal baseline tariff that could raise approximately $2.63 trillion over 10 years. And this was all part of, again, Section 232 and the new Section 122, which is estimated to raise more than $500 billion to $662 billion in net revenue over the next decade. So this is still huge. And recently, this is what Trump had to say on Truth Social. He posted this just the other day. He said, "How can the Democrats not like how the U.S. Supreme Court votes? The Democrat justices stick together like glue, never failing to wander from the warped and perverse policies, ideas, and cases put before them. They always vote as a group or block, even that new low IQ person that somehow found her way to the bench, Sleepy Joe. The Republican justices don't stick together. They give the Democrats win after win, like a $159 billion pile of cash on a completely ridiculous tariff decision, and nasty, one-sided questions on the country-destroying subject of birthright citizenship, something which virtually no other country in the world is stupid enough to allow. It was meant for babies of slaves, not for the babies of Chinese billionaires. No, certain Republican justices have just gone weak, stupid, and bad, completely violating what they supposedly stood for, handing over $160 billion in tariff refunds to people who have been ripping off our country for years is unexplainable. One little sentence would have stopped this record-setting payment from having to be made. It is a travesty. Their tariff decision was an unnecessary and expensive slap in the face to the USA and a giant victory for its opponents. If they rule against our country on birthright citizenship, which they probably will, it will be even worse. If that's possible, it will cost America massive amounts of money, but more importantly, it will cost America its dignity. No, the radical left Democrats don't need to pack the court. It's already packed. Now, one thing you have to realize here is that Trump, he frequently makes sure that it doesn't look like the Supreme Courts are bought out or certain people are bought out and on his side. He has to distance himself such that from the optics of media and how they portray things, they're forced in some sense to say, oh, these guys went against Trump for a big decision. And this is one of the biggest decisions that sounds quantifiably like a lot, which it is. And then he's also mentioning for the birthright citizenship thing, maybe foreshadowing something to come, meaning that they might strike it down. And so you got to understand that this whole narrative, a lot of people think, oh, he appointed certain people and they're, having to bid Trump's doing and all this stuff. They're saying these things, and Trump frequently has to counter that to make optics look like, oh, it doesn't look like something's happening behind the scenes. So that's one point of why he might be doing this and saying certain things. And it's part of the optics of impressions, the optics of how do you handle certain narratives that are being put out there, because the mainstream media, they're in some sense forced to say, well, this was a crazy decision. It didn't go in Trump's favor, but I guess they're not bought out in that sense. They're independent. But he's also foreshadowing or giving clues about other things like the Democrat judges. So let's see what happens beyond this. But I also want to mention this quick video. Listen to what Trump says here in the State of the Union address back in February. And so this is very interesting because I want to revisit something he mentioned right after the ruling came out in February.
Despite the disappointing ruling, these powerful, country saving, it's saving our country, the kind of money we're taking in, peace protecting. Many of the wars I settled was because of the threat of tariffs. I wouldn't have been able to settle them without. Will remain in place under fully approved and tested alternative legal statutes. And they have been tested for a long time. They're a little more complex, but they're actually probably better, leading to a solution that will be even stronger than before. Congressional action will not be necessary. It's already time-tested and approved. And as time goes by, I believe the tariffs paid for by foreign countries will, like in the past, substantially replace the modern-day system of income tax, taking a great financial burden off the people that I love.
Remember, back then he gave a big clue about this whole process of replacing the income tax system with the tariffs that are bringing in this revenue. And so let's see what happens with this whole, the Fed chair being replaced and all this stuff and the IRS talks and many other things with the financial system and the debt clock and everything that's changing. But this is very interesting because, again, promises made, promises kept. Let's see how this moves forward as this whole ordeal with Iran and everything takes place. But if this is true, then this is also a big thing that he mentioned and that we'll see come to pass in a sense. So let's see what happens. I want to know your guys' comments down below. Would love it if you guys would also consider supporting me. We're trying to reach our goal for the end of this month financially. You guys know I'm listener supported. I have a lot of different things going on behind the scenes and would love it if you guys can partner with me financially. All the information is down below in the description, givesendgo.com/chrisyoonyt. Also have PayPal, Zelle, Venmo, more to come. Talk to you guys very soon.